Awesome. Hello, my friend. I hope you're having an amazing day. This is Heather. And because because this is the real world, my phone is ringing in the background. And this is the Back to Me podcast. This is the awesome Friday edition. This is the celebrity chat edition where I get to talk to awesome people and learn amazing things. And my super awesome celebrity this week is Dr. Lucille. I don't know. I only know you as Dr. Lucille. So how do you say
That's
your
fine. Your last name is just pronounced Neckis.
Okay. I'm just gonna Dr. Lucille just seems to fit you.
That's what I generally use anyway.
Right? And this week we're talking, well, I mean, as we know, our conversations could go anywhere, all around wellness. And I often talk about the 6 aspects of wellness. And then we're talking spiritual and emotional wellness today. I think that's what we thought we would touch on, although we're not limited to that, of course. So first, I'm interested, and I think I've heard you explain this before, of how you got into what you do. And maybe you could tell people a little bit what kind of doctor you are as well and how you got into it.
Yeah, I'm a psychiatrist, and I have. If you're talking about how did I get into spirituality,
Whichever way you want to take it, it's great
yeah,
for me.
yeah. Well, one colleague phrased it as out of the box psychiatrist. I'm an out of the box psychiatrist like her. And I won't go through the winding, meandering journey I took to get to psychiatry. But when I did get into medicine, I realized that psychiatry was the one specialty area that allowed for exploring the spiritual far more than any other specialty area.
Really?
Yes, especially if, as at the time I did, I was trained in a time when psychoanalysis and psychotherapy were what was associated with psychiatry. And since then, the pendulum has swung so that people now associate psychiatry with just prescribing medications mostly.
Right.
But at the time, that the field of psychiatry really, the training was mostly about psychotherapy. And it was more holistically oriented in that it was recognized that people's spirituality had a tremendous amount to do with their mental health.
What do you think the swing was?
Well, that's a whole political, historical
Right.
issue, which it was, to put it bluntly, it was that the pharmaceutical companies started taking control. Okay.
Right.
And so all the psychoanalysts, psychotherapists who were in the medical training centers, the training hospitals, were basically ousted. There was like a big purge, and only the psychiatrists that were wanting to do medication prescribing and monitoring were allowed to continue in their positions of authority. So I felt very fortunate that I was able to train during that kind of heyday of psychotherapy training, although, mind you, there were a multitude of restrictions and limitations to that too. And it was one of the reasons those restrictions were what drove me into becoming solo practitioner in my own office rather than being incorporated into the hospital system.
Right. I feel like the practice would lose so much just by turning to the pharmaceuticals versus, and like, not that pharmaceuticals don't necessarily have a place, but that it limits themselves so much from all the other aspects of things that could be going on, right?
Absolutely it does. And it disconnects the person from the divine, from themselves, from nature, because you're no longer focused on the natural substances in our environment that could enhance health, right? It's like herbs, supplements, basic good nutrition.
Forest bathing, going outside.
Absolutely. And going out into the sun, so, and nature, as you know, has so many amazing energies. We can sort of feel them, but we have no idea really. We're a bit disconnected from those energies as well. And yet they are like forest bathing. They're a beautiful, mysterious, powerful force. But we don't have a real awareness of all the ways that it's impacting us when we're out in nature. So I don't know if I answered your question exactly, but for me, the psychotherapy was the thing that got me really connected into doing a psychiatric practice, and doing it had to be done outside of the hospital system. So, and I had a long journey with spirituality from the time I was very, very young. And everywhere I went in my medical training, I would also find myself doing things that kind of spurred on my spiritual journey. And it really opened me up to an awareness again of how much the spiritual connection could really enhance every aspect of a human being's life.
Right. And I even mentioned earlier divine, and divine can be anything, right? I mean,
Absolutely.
when I use spirituality as one of the balance points of finding balance in your life, I just say, it's like a connection to a greater purpose. And when you go outside and you spend time in nature, it just feels like there is so much more to connect to than, and I mean, maybe you don't know this. I can't remember if we talked about this, but I actually guide trips into Georgian Bay, no facilities types trips, camping trips. And when people first go to them, they are uncomfortable. They're worried about this or that, or how am I going to think of the activities of daily living? How am I going to fill in the blank? But then within 2 or 3 days, you can see the shift in the people, and they just feel so much better, but even if they don't know why, right? But I know that, I mean, I live in a big city, you live in a big city. Sometimes you feel you can't figure out how to connect to those things. So you're still practicing
in psychiatry and psychotherapy. Yeah.
And I guess, do you find that you can find a way to help people in big cities figure out how to reconnect with?
Do you know, it's the law of attraction, because I have a lot of psychiatric patients. They come to me because I do have that bigger awareness. So a greater proportion of my patients than not are into things like natural healing. They are into being out in nature. And I am blessed because I live right by Lake Ontario. And I can go there romping with my puppy on the beach whenever I want to. And one thing, one of the areas that I love to study was biogeometry, which is part of my spiritual path. And in it, you learn that there are 3 frequencies of energy that are enhancing of the human being, and they're the most potently, divinely inspired energies you could be exposed to. And when you're in them, you heal physically and you feel a stronger connection with the divine. And those energies, they're called the BG3 energies, are concentrated at shorelines.
What's the term again? BG3.
BG3. So not the not the singing group, but it's BG3. And so that energy is concentrated in nature, in mountains, and at shorelines. And so that's why people, without even being aware of it, they're attracted to those areas. And, when here it's like tourist season now at the beach, and you're tripping over all the bodies of the people who are trying to get right in that spot, that gorgeous BG3 zone, just enjoying and lapping it all up. And bless them for doing that. Without being aware of it, we do instinctively go to those beautiful, divinely inspired energies.
Have you heard of the book Blue Mind?
No, I haven't.
So I've just actually started, I have the audiobook, and a kayaker that I know recommended it to me. And it's a person who's studied why we are so attracted to water and what happens to our bodies when we're in water. And I've just started it. It's fascinating, but I wonder if it's like part of that energy that, what did you call it? Biogeometry energy at the shoreline. But I wonder if there's some kind of energy of being in the water.
Absolutely. The water itself has extremely healing energies. The properties of water are miraculous. So your kayaker friend is really onto something. And you can do so much healing just from the use of pure water that's vibrationally very potent, high frequency. So that goes back to ancient times, the blessings with water, there's so much in nature that we are disconnected from that is just waiting to connect us with the divine, right?
And we separated ourselves so much from it. It's so interesting. I mean, I understand like there's conveniences of having everything really close by, and I can just walk there to go to the store, and I can just walk there, and we gather in communities for one reason, but it's almost like finding that balance between community and convenience and still being able to get those natural things that we need. I was just actually looking up the book, so Blue Mind, and the author was Wallace Nichols, if you want to check it out.
Oh, nice. Nice. Yeah. So make a note of that. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah.
And so, I mean, it is interesting that the people who are drawn to you are almost like the people who are already on that path. It's like
That's
you're
right.
just helping them get that little bit more that they need, that extra help. And I know you can't, as they say, you can lead a horse to water. It's like how it's reaching the people who don't understand it yet. That's part of my challenge, is reaching the people who don't understand yet how much happier they could be, how much healthier they can be, how much more connected with everything they can feel. And sometimes it's just little small changes, right? They don't have to be big, epic, gigantic, quit your job and jump off a cliff kind of changes.
Absolutely. In fact, I think that subtle changes are often the most potent, because it's kind of like they're gently leading the person past their resistance to the truth, right? Whereas if they have a big aha, some kind of major revelation, that can be life changing for sure, but they may just dismiss it and have no way of incorporating it into their day-to-day life. And so it just goes by the wayside.
I just thought of like a near-death experience. You have a near-death experience. You're like, oh my gosh, I have to change my life. But then regular life just keeps trucking along, and it fades further into the background. And Absolutely. I have a friend who's a coach who always says little changes for big changes.
That's exactly right. Because, we do have to work with our neural circuitry, right? And so any major shift is incorporated much better into the neural circuitry if it is incorporated and chewed on and repeated and chewed on, and you create bigger and bigger neural networks around whatever that experience is.
I can
And
say like the habit of creating habits.
that's right. Exactly. Exactly. And the other thing that I have found so fascinating is that I do a particular form of therapy. It's a modality called EMDR when I'm working with psychiatric patients. And that involves applying a bilateral alternating stimulus to the body while a person is attentive to memories of trauma or loss or upset of any kind. And you know what happens, Heather, is they may not have any real spiritual connection when they begin, but just by doing the work, and I'm not directing them anywhere, just letting them go wherever they need to spontaneously, they often start feeling some kind of interesting spiritual connection. Like they may start recording that, you know what? I almost feel like there are angels talking to me right now. This is weird. What is going on? Or they will suddenly start experiencing a memory in such a positive way, and they'll see it surrounded by white light, brilliant white light. Or they'll be suddenly filled with a sense of love that they'd never experienced before, maybe even towards their abusers. Sometimes spontaneously, these feelings of love just come pouring forth from them.
So that being a stimulus and they're imagining, but you're not really telling them what to do. I'm just picturing.
No. I just say describe. I basically have them describe what the memory is as they perceive it in the moment. And I say, okay, let's just have you notice that, and you do the tapping, or I can do tapping on them. And as you're doing the tapping, all you're doing is observing whatever pops into your mind. So it's completely spontaneous.
Wow. I had never heard of that type of therapy.
Oh, okay. It is much more common in the U.S. It was discovered or developed maybe about 20 years ago.
Okay.
But
And is it kind of like the EFT tapping?
It's a body mind thing. It's a little bit like tapping the EFT, but in this instance, it's actually a little simpler in that you just have to find some spot on your body that you are comfortable tapping on, or you move your eyes back and forth. Either way, but whatever movement you do, it has to be registered in the brain as crossing the midline and being alternate. It's going back and forth, back and forth. And for some reason, the brain really likes that. And it stimulates the brain to create more complex neural networks.
Wow.
And the more complex the neural networks are, the more adaptive your brain becomes in dealing with anything. So whether it's to clear old trauma, whether it's to learn new material, whether it's performance enhancement, for example, it's used a lot for, for people who want to improve their athletic performance, or they want to improve their presentation skills. So it's not just for trauma and healing, it's also for performance enhancement. But it speaks to, I think, a really profound, spontaneous healing capacity that we all have.
I agree. Yeah. And I mean, you can see in some places there's people who, two people with the same diagnosis, depending on what they believe will happen, is usually what will happen.
That's right.
Good or bad, right?
Right.
And it's not judging in any way. It's just going, wow, the brain is that powerful that it can almost direct or make an outcome that you expect to happen. I always remember that story of, I think it was I'll say it anecdotally, a car salesman, his boss said, go out and see how many red cars you see. He says, there's so many red cars. It's because that's what he was looking for.
That's right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. Yeah.
So if you expect to be healthy, not to say things won't happen, because as you know, I expect myself to be healthy and live a long life, and I had a stroke in October, but I expected to get better. And now most people don't believe me when I tell them I had a stroke.
Yeah, absolutely. You have undergone a real miracle. I mean, you are a miracle. We're all a miracle in our day to day maintenance. Just the maintenance of our body, how it works day to day, is an absolute miracle. And yeah, we're all capable of those healing miracles as well. So it's wonderful that you've had that experience, because I'm sure it must make you feel not invincible, but certainly much more perhaps confident, would you say, in your healing ability?
I mean, I've been doing yoga for quite 22 years, quite a long time. So I feel, but even with that, I feel like that incident has tuned me even more to being aware of my physical self, how it's connected with the rest of me, how things may or may not operate in my highest, potential,
Mhm.
and being aware enough to say, okay, well, that's not the most ideal way to be for this particular instance. So I'm going to take care. This is also part was the impetus for me to really dive very deeply into the take care of yourself world. You have to take care of yourself. I mean, I had the advantage that I already was, but now I want everyone to be able to, when things happen to them, to recover from it. So, I mean, it's made me confident in interesting ways. It's given me, I think, more of a voice to stand up and say, listen, you need to take care of yourself. And I mean, the podcast is giving people as many resources as I can to help them, because everyone's different in what it is they need. Um, and it's funny because someone asked me this yesterday. Someone asked me, well, are you scared all the time now? I said, no, not because what happened was so unexpected and so uncommon for someone who is healthy, right? I had a
Mhm.
dissection of my carotid artery and they couldn't tell me why. And I didn't have any stroke symptoms. And when my neurologist looked at my brain scan, he said the symptoms that I had were not the area that was affected by the stroke.
Mm.
So I said, well, that's probably because you don't totally understand how my brain works.
Of course, that's the point.
But
Don't.
instead of being afraid, just bring more awareness to how amazing it is to be alive, how important it is to take care of yourself. And I keep hearing this in multiple messages from multiple places of, fill your cup first, take care of yourself, fill yourself with the fuel that you need so that you can have the power and energy to go out and help whoever needs
Yes.
helping in whatever way you are meant to help. You don't have to cure cancer or anything, but
Mhm.
um, in however you were meant to help people, go out and help them. And that's kind of what has happened to me. And it's also, I mean, I've always done things to try and exercise my brain. I've experienced, my grandparents lived late into their 90s. My grandmother was alive when I was in my 40s. So, and I had a great grandmother until university, but I saw how dementia and my
Yes.
in-laws comes in.
Yeah.
So I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, how do I combat dementia? And they do talk about that kind of bilateral use of the brain. I happen to be left-handed, and so, but I make sure that I do things ambidextrously. I try to use both hands for
Excellent.
tasks.
Excellent.
I paint, so sometimes I change hands and paint with both hands.
Good.
But it's interesting, right-handed people, as a therapist, I'll suggest to them, partly to relieve tension, to use their left hand on something like their mouse. Some of them look at me like I'm insane, but I think it helps their brain if they try to use their other hand. And now you've just told me that it does. So I'm going to
Yes.
go tell them Dr. Lucille said.
Yes, I'm the authority. Yes, right.
That leave me.
But it is you brought up something very, very interesting, which is that awareness, bringing your awareness to your body, because the body itself is our consciousness pervades our body. We can disconnect from our awareness of the body, but the body is always conscious and it is giving us messages if we will listen, right? And one of the things that you said that I think is really, really profound, you can tell people to take care of themselves and they'll go, yeah, I guess I should, but it won't have traction until, for example, as you have the experience, they face a physical crisis or they start getting inspired to bring some kind of service into the world, purpose.
Right.
And, and you see it most often with moms, where I've had numerous patients who were like cocaine addicted or addicted to other drugs or whatever. They were living on the streets or prostituting themselves or in all sorts of horrendous situations in life. And self-care was just not part of their awareness. They get pregnant and all of a sudden, whoa, they have a higher purpose. And all of a sudden they matter because they have this beautiful life form that they have to take care of. And it is really miraculous and so inspiring to see them transform their lives as a result and become very much focused on this vehicle has to work properly so I can be there for my baby.
How many people use children or grandchildren? I have a friend who, it was grandchildren, said, if I'm going to be here to see my grandchildren, I had better get myself healthier because I'm going to miss everything. And in some ways, I do understand it. It's like there's this little life that you want to see. And it's a miracle that we have babies, right? That's a miracle by itself. But I almost feel like in some ways, how come you can't do that for yourself?
Well, I think again, you can. When I see it, it's not always connected to, I have to be there for my children. Sometimes it's connected to being aware that you have a dream that is constantly nudging you. Okay, so I have a friend that I met on the spiritual journey, a number of friends actually, who realize that they have an ability to channel healing energy, right? And they feel very strongly connected to certain angels and archangels. They feel like that divine healing force is meant to work through their bodies. And they realized that they had to bring that into the world. Because I don't know if you've probably experienced this. If you've got an inner nudge about something that you're meant to do and you resist it, oh gosh, that sets up such an internal conflict. It's so uncomfortable.
Right.
But when you just release all your resistance to it and go with it and say, yes, I'm meant to be channeling this healing energy, you suddenly feel so much better. And then it becomes imperative that you take good care of your vehicle, because it is actually the channel for the divine healing of others. And so I often find that it is that sense of purpose that drives people to being much more into their own self-care. It's very hard to do if it's just you. If you feel, oh, well, yeah, I should do it. I would feel better. My blood pressure will come down. My blood sugars will be blah, blah, blah. But unless it's really connected strongly to a purpose, it's hard to sustain.
Yeah, that is true. You need to, and that's where I guess when I'm talking about spirituality, it's like your connection to something bigger than yourself, but recognizing that you are still part of that connection. So yeah, I see what you're meaning, and I agree. Just to put it quite simply, I agree. And it's interesting that you just reminded me when I studied Reiki, my Reiki teacher did say, you are a channel And if you don't take care of your channel, it's like having atherosclerosis, there's stuff in the way of the energy getting through. So take
Mhm.
good care of your channel.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
And that doesn't mean that everybody has to run out and be an energy healer, but you are still a channel for some bigger purpose. I believe everybody's here for something.
Mhm.
There's something, one of the people that I listen to says you're a cosmic being who came to learn something or share something or do something. And it's like you said, if you keep resisting it, you're going to feel like life is always a struggle because,
Right. And I think you also develop physical illnesses after a while when you keep blocking that divine energy trying to flow through you.
I agree with that. Because I've known people who, when I've heard what physical illness they had, I just said, oh, yes, that makes complete sense.
Mhm.
And you can, my anatomy teacher said this to me once because I was a mature student when I went back to massage therapy school. I turned 40 in massage school, and me being the mothering type, I was trying to help corral, teach. And my anatomy teacher said to me, Heather, you should be the lighthouse, not the lifeboat. So when you see people who are, I can see clearly quite often what people should be doing, but I can't force them to do it. I have to let them find their way there. I think that's why I went into coaching, so I can help them. I could turn on the light for them, but they still have to decide what to do. And I
Mhm.
guess in some ways that is what you do as well. Like you're helping people turn on their lights. Am I right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I try to keep out of it as much as possible, just like your massage teacher advised you. I just let the person, I give them a supportive environment in which their inner healing capacity, their connection to the divine can come through. And if they decide, no, sorry, it's too much, I don't want to go there, I have to let go. I have to surrender. There's nothing I can do, and bless them. They move on.
Right.
However, at the same time, I've had many people who have just not been ready. And then we stop the therapy. And then 5, 10 years later, they come back because they realize they're then ready to move. So you can't predict, you really can't predict when people will be ready or if they'll ever be ready. But it is an honoring of their path. You just have to honor that their journey is their journey. And as much as you know exactly what they're supposed to be doing, and you want to strangle them, why do you keep overeating? Why do you keep going back to the cigarettes? Whatever. Yeah. And you kind of have to, kind of slap yourself and go, no,
Take a breath. It's their road. It's not your road.
Mhm.
I have had that happen where I just wanted to go, can't you see?
I know. And all you're doing is you're creating more stress for yourself.
But what's also funny is I've made changes in my life where people have said to me, well, thank God you finally figured that out because they could see it and
Yes.
I wasn't seeing it. But it is true. Sometimes you have to bang your head against the wall enough times for you to stop and say, why am I banging my head against the wall?
Exactly.
There has to be a moment where you suddenly have that there's knowing and then there's knowing, right?
That's right. That's right.
So
And I think that's the important thing too, because that ties into intuition, which is so much a part of spiritual connection. There will be that little knock on the door of your consciousness that goes, this doesn't make sense. Why are you doing this? Okay. And you have to be really connected to your body because your body will also speak to you. That tightening of the gut, the tension in the shoulders, all of a sudden you feel like a deflation in your body. All of these things are messages from the body telling you you're on the wrong path.
And it's interesting. So I've been teaching yoga. I've actually been teaching yoga for 18 years, and I can see in classes because your body does store things up if you're not paying attention. And
Mhm.
if you spontaneously start crying in pigeon, which happens a lot,
Yes. Yeah.
is, because hips are a good place to store stuff.
Mhm.
They're just like, I'm just going to put it down there. Or in massage, some people store it in their feet, interestingly enough.
Yes.
And they just, there's so many people that I see who think they live from the neck up.
That's
But
right.
what I'll often say to people is you think your brain is in charge until you have an injury. And then you realize that everything is now focused on this body part that's not working right. Like maybe your knee hurts, maybe your foot hurts, maybe you broke your arm. And this goes way back to when I was a St. John ambulance cadet. One of my instructors said, pain rules the body. So when you're in pain, that's what your brain is going to focus on. I mean, there's obviously ways around that after reading John Kabat-Zinn, but I think his point was, you live in your head, you live in your head, you live in your head until you realize, oh my God, I have a body.
That's right. That's right. And you notice how in our world, or at least in the developed countries, the emphasis is so much on head work. Of improving your cognition, of improving your problem solving capabilities, of being more creative in terms of getting that project done for your corporate job. And we're so over focused on the brain. It's like our preoccupation with computers. Computers are going to enhance our lives so much. And the brain is our body's equivalent. It's like we do think of it as a central processing unit for everything. And I think that is one of the most damaging attitudes that we could take for exactly the reason that you mentioned. I really think that the whole aspect of total spiritual connection can only come through the heart. That the heart is really the portal to divine energies coming through, the portal to divine genius coming through. And our brains are really only there to serve the heart's desires or to follow through on the heart's wisdom. And you've probably had this experience where, I'm at my wit's end. I don't know how to get through to a person who's, say, in a victim mode or whatever. And all of a sudden, I just drop into my heart. I stop trying to figure out what's the right thing to say, blah, blah, blah. And I will drop into my heart and I will simply listen for a while to myself and to the patient. And then all of a sudden, some piece of wisdom pops out of my mouth and I look at, where did that come from? Did I actually think that? Like, I don't remember actually thinking that at any point, but somehow I channeled some piece of wisdom just by coming out of my head and going into my heart.
I had the divine download.
Exactly.
So and this happens to me quite often when I'm teaching, because I still teach yoga and I teach a yoga Tai Chi fusion class. And people will say, can you teach what you taught us last week? And I say, no.
Because you can't even remember it.
I don't even know what I taught you last week.
That's right.
Right? I'll teach a whole class and I'll think, oh, I have no idea what we just did, but I hope it was good.
Well, it must have been because they found it memorable, right?
Right? Yeah, true enough. And I will have conversations with people, and sometimes I feel like, oh, I should be paying closer attention to them, but it's almost like I drop into a little bit of a semi-trance mode, for lack of a better word, where I'm listening but not listening.
That's exactly right. I do that as well, because it's really about tuning into the energies more than the words. So I can have someone telling me, oh, had a great week. Everything was fine. And yet I'm feeling this rage coming at me from them. Not directed at me, but it's kind of like, yes, I'm fine. Everything went fine, that sort of thing. And it is really important to have that dual awareness. And you're sort of listening to what they're saying, but you have to listen to the fact the music and the lyrics don't match. And there's a weird energy coming at you. I often go into a bit of brain fog when I'm working with somebody who's in resistance about seeing something about themselves or conflict. Recently it was a client came in and she was into this dramatic, painful, exquisitely detailed story about her delusional sister attacking her verbally. And it went on and on and on and on. And I just started going into major brain fog as she was talking. And then I said something that was, again, that piece of wisdom popped out. And all of a sudden my head cleared and she stopped complaining. And she was like realizing that, yeah, all I have to do is click the delete button and all of this passes away. I don't have to be a victim to my delusional sister. Right. But I often have to tune into what's going on in my body. It gives me a sense of what's going on with them, really.
Right. And I also find that, oops, hello, microphone. I also find that what was I going to say? Oh, talk about brain, not that you're delusional or anything. It's my own brain fog. But often I'll find that if I'm talking to someone and I just lost my train of thought, obviously that train left the station. So,
well, as I say, if it's important enough, the train will pull back into the station.
The train is just making a loop. That's the turnaround loop. Right? It is true. People get stuck in loops of energy quite often, and they don't realize that they can step off the track, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't go into a brain fog. I think what'll happen, like I remember the train came back. I think sometimes the problem-solving brain is not the right brain to be solving what's going on with someone, because not all problems are logic-based.
That's exactly right.
So we're thinking, this is what my brain was thinking. My logical brain was thinking, how to solve a problem. But what if it's not anything to do with logic?
Right.
So you can't use that. It's like you're trying to use the wrong tool to correct something. So the thinking brain isn't always the place. And I know that they've actually shown, the enteric, the gut is very smart. It knows what's going on.
Sure. It's got all of the neurotransmitters that the brain has. And in fact, it has more serotonin receptors.
And it's smart because it doesn't try to logic everything. It doesn't it doesn't seem to have any ulterior motives, or it's not telling a story. Often we get caught up in stories when we're inside our brains, because our brains are very good at stories. And I think stories are awesome. But our gut doesn't try to tell us stories. It doesn't have an ulterior motive. It just says, this is the way it is, friends.
Yeah. Yeah, it's that kind of pure awareness where you don't have to logic your way through it or try to figure your way out of the conundrum. It's like, boom, the answer is there right away.
And I've noticed that if you're trying to make a decision and you're logicking, and you will actually, your body will start to do that stress reaction.
Exactly.
I call this like the Toronto muscles when your shoulders go up by your ears. But what I've also noticed, because I've done it to myself, where I've finally just made a decision, everything releases because that brain tension, body tension is gone. We've made a decision. We can stop fighting with each other, go back to your corners.
Mhm,
And let's get on with it.
mhm. Absolutely. Yeah. So, we have such a wealth of power, like genuine power that's connected to universal power. And it comes through in the most interesting ways through our bodies, through our intuition, through pure awareness. And unfortunately, I think I think most of the mental health issues that we have in this world are about that central disconnection we feel from the divine. You know, that, once we start separating ourselves off from the divine, we have separated ourselves off from that absolutely essential fuel. It's a life force. And that is something that I think a lot of people, especially over the last, 2 years or so, with all the fear being generated in our world, are more and more disconnected from, unfortunately. Other people, actually, there's another stream of experience going on where people have become more spiritually awake and connected, which is beautiful. But it's kind of like there's a bit of a divide that's been happening, and people have made choices to either go with fear, which again it inhabits our brains. Our brains are, I think, infected with fear and can be triggered to fear easily. And then there is the spiritual aspect, which is just encompasses our whole being. And for those people who are really connected with their entire being and are still connected to the divine, those are the ones who can pull out of the fear far more and create miracles in their lives, like really start thriving in their lives.
And it is true. I think I agree with you that I think a lot of the problems are a disconnection with divine and purpose and recognizing that I feel like some of the fear is feeling like, they're alone and they're just this little person all by themselves. And it's interesting because I've been doing a meditation where, you are your little person and you're on your planet and you're in your solar system and you're in your galaxy and then you're expanding out to the universe. And my first thought was, oh, I'm so wee. I'm such this little tiny little speck. But then I'm like, no, because I'm plugged into this giant thing, this giant energy of whatever you want to call it. And I also wonder, like, sometimes I think people feel like they're just this little speck, this tiny little, not even a pinprick. But if they could plug into that, and then I sometimes wonder if it's that because organized religion, for good or for bad, sometimes is not necessarily supportive of kind of the universal whole. It has its own, like I've looked at all the different religions, and when you strip them all away, they all say the same thing. But when you add on all of the things that have developed over centuries and years, sometimes they get a bit lost. And people, I think, feel resistance to the rules. There's too many rules. And there's no rules like that in the divine is just
Exactly. I mean, do we really need this massive bureaucracy in every religion that really tends to separate us even more from God? And it's not like there isn't benefit from religions. I mean, they do charitable works, and people enjoy going and singing in the choirs there and all of that lovely stuff.
It can't create a really nice community.
It can.
I don't like the exclusionary aspect of some organized religion.
Absolutely. And it's also fascinating you brought that up, because I actually had the inspiration to bring a book to this podcast, and it was one of the mind-blowing books that I've read about spirituality. I don't know if you know Neil Douglas Klotz.
I don't think I do know that one.
Okay, he is an Aramaic scholar. In other words, he's spent most of his academic career studying the language that apparently Christ spoke at the time that he was teaching here in the world. And you may know that the Bible that we have been taught, in the Christian world, the teachings in the Bible, which is generally the King James Version, is separated from the original teachings of Christ by about 4 or 5 different translations. Okay, so Aramaic went to Old Hebrew, went to Greek, went to Latin, went to Middle English, and then, it's modern.
The broken telephone of the divine.
Broken telephone. And are you okay with me just reading a short paragraph of his translation directly from the Aramaic? And you can guess what part of the King James Version of the Bible it comes from. But it's just very brief. Here it is. O birther, in other words, someone who gives birth. O birther, father, mother of the cosmos, you create all that moves in light. Can you guess what the King James Version translation is?
Is that, I can't even guess. Oh my gosh.
Our Father which art in heaven. Can you see how it just does not encapsulate the essence? And Aramaic is a very poetic language that is very fluid, and you can put so many different meanings to one phrase. And so if you read this, and I recommend anybody who's interested in really getting closer to the real teachings of Christ, read it, because we're talking about nature just now. It is full of allusions to nature, to the natural world. It doesn't focus on father. The Christ teachings focus on mother, father, always the two together.
Amazing.
And
what's that called?
It's called Prayers of the Cosmos.
Okay, I have not actually heard of that one. And it's funny because I read so many of this type of book of I'll read anything, right?
Yes.
Just to keep expanding my knowledge and inviting new ideas and new ways of viewing things. That's very cool. And it is, I never would have guessed that that's what that was. I was like, I don't know, about the creation of the universe or.
Yes. And so that's when this book first came out, it blew people's minds. It was like uncovering the essence of Christ that they'd never, ever gotten from the Bible as we know it. And again, I'm not being critical of the Bible because there's a lot of wisdom in it. But I always felt, I don't know about you, I always felt that, you know what? There's so many stories here. I'm not sure which is true, which isn't. And after I had to really kind of read the Bible with that sense of, what does my heart resonate with? Where does it light up? Which kind of pointed me at, maybe this particular passage makes my heart light up because it's true.
And I did hear a religious scholar once say, the Bible was more a collection of parables than actual history written down as this happened, then this happened, then this happened. Right?
Exactly.
It's almost like a mythology, a string of stories to demonstrate something to you. And I remember when I was in India, going to Buddhism for just a moment, I was talking to a monk and I said, well, why are you worshiping the Buddha? Because he asked you not to. He asked you to just, here's some things that I think might be true. Try them out. And the monk said, oh, we're not worshiping him. We're just honoring his knowledge. I was like, okay. But I think the human mind does want to attach sometimes to something.
And I think that's
our responsibility.
Yeah, yes. And I think that's a form of separation when we put someone, a great teacher, on a pedestal and worship them. It's kind of like saying, well, you're there and I'm here and never the twain shall meet, But really, and at the core of everything, every major religious or spiritual leader, the enlightened ones, like Buddha, like Christ, Muhammad, etc., we're giving the message that You are the light too. I'm not here to just brag that I'm a miracle worker. I'm not here to do party tricks and create loaves and fishes and all of that just for your entertainment or to rub your nose in the fact that you're inferior. You know, yeah, Christ said, two or more of you gathered in my name can do this and more. Right.
But we
And
have had ourselves away from that, right? And
right. Well, and it makes sense that, then huge bureaucracy gets formed around this. There are all these middlemen between us and God that keep telling us, no, you'll never be like Christ. You're a sinner. At least that's a tradition that I grew up in, right? But that's another interesting point. In Aramaic, there is no word for sin.
then
That was something that apparently, and I have to look back on the history of this. It was something that only came up in, I believe it was the Middle Ages. But the closest word to sin in Aramaic is a word that really means not in the right time.
okay,
Not in the right time or not in the right timing.
which is completely different.
It is completely different.
Completely different. Like, you harvested the crops too early. It was
Yes.
the wrong time, but that doesn't mean that you're evil.
That's exactly right. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Wow. Oh my gosh.
Mhm.
So much, so much. And I think that, part of my personal mission in life that I've discovered, I actually have discovered it in drips and drabs, and it just keeps coming back around, is to help, I think, illuminate, turn on the lights, as they say. And I feel like we have a similar mission in life.
Oh, yeah. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
We could go on forever, but I'm going to ask you, do you have any parting thoughts for everyone? And let people know it will be in all the show notes everywhere, but the best way for people to reach you.
Well, my parting thought is we are all manifestations of the divine here on this planet. And as you said, Heather, we were meant to bring light into this world. And just please, everybody, remember that, and remember that the key to feeling that is in your heart. It's not going to come from your brain.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And so, yes, if people want to reach me, my email, they can email me. It's it's Lucille at drlucille.ca. No dot between Dr. Lucille. I'm also on Facebook as Dr. Lucille Neckes. I'm on Instagram at Lucille Neckes.
And I do encourage everyone to reach out and connect with you and start shining some of these lights. Let everybody shine. Imagine
Yes.
how bright the world could be, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you so much for coming and sharing some time with me. Thank you for sharing that book, because now it's going on my book list.
Great. Good. It should be on everybody's book list. Yes.
And yes, I really appreciate you taking some time and spending some time with me.
Well, it's been an honor and a joy. And thank you so much, Heather, for helping me to bring my little light into the world through your podcast.
We'll just double our lights. 2 lights just make more light, right?
Absolutely.
All right. Take care, everybody. Again, reach out if you need some assistance or you want to have a chat, and we will see you again next